Hello everyone, welcome to Good Morning America Health. I'm your host, Tanya Rivero. An Arkansas couple got quite a surprise when during a routine ultrasound, the pregnant woman found out she was pregnant again, but she's not having twins. She conceived her babies 2.5 weeks apart. To learn more about this medical marvel, we turn to ABC News Chief Medical Editor, Dr. Tim Johnson. Dr. Tim?
Thank you, Tanya. And joining us to talk about this obviously very unusual case is Dr. Karen Boyle, a fertility expert at the Greater Baltimore Medical Center. Welcome back to the program, Karen.
Thanks for having me back, Dr. Tim.
So my first question, I guess, is a fairly obvious one. How do you experts know that this is a case of two different conceptions, 2.5 weeks apart, versus some kind of twinning in which they're developing at different rates?
Well, when the woman had her ultrasound, initially they saw one sac, one baby developing, and that baby had a certain gestational age. And then they noticed a second heartbeat in a child that was much, much younger developmentally. And although you can have disparity and differences in growth, not usually at that point in time. And so I think the initial take on it was they didn't know what to make of it, and they sent her to different experts that then evaluated her by repetitive ultrasounds. And it indeed does really sound like this is a true case of different times of conception for these children.
And how far in her development were they able to find these two separate images on ultrasound? What pregnancy week was she in then?
She was pretty early. I don't know the exact week for her pregnancy that, when they saw the two develop, but they were able to at least see a heartbeat, on the second child. So she, in her case, one child is about 2.5 to 3 weeks behind the first child.
Now, this phenomenon is extremely rare from what I've been told. How rare is it?
Extremely. It's so rare, there's no prevalence or incidence. In the literature, I could only find about 10 reported cases. And it actually, interestingly, is much more common in animals.
Because?
Well, because in certain animal species, like different rodents and rabbits and even some farm animals, they have sometimes, not all animals, but sometimes they'll have a delay of implantation. And there's a delay of the fetus actually implanting in the uterine wall, and that animal can continue their menstrual cycle and ovulation can occur. So that's why it can happen in different animal species. But in humans, incredibly rare, incredibly rare.
And in those handful of reported cases you refer to, how have the outcomes been?
Well, some of the outcomes have been just fine. It depends upon sort of the disparity of conception times. And in some of the cases as well, there was a question of really, is this, a case of different timing of conception? So I think that the two that I had read were in Great Britain, and the children were delivered, and one child was delivered prematurely. And that really is the risk with this, is depending upon how late the second baby is conceived. And in the reports that I've read, it can happen up to about 24 days later than the first conception. You're putting that second baby at risk for lung development problems and the such. But some of the early cases, there were difficulties with the health of that second child when the baby was born too early.
But in this case, 2.5 weeks apart, if you can get one of them, the earliest one to full term, the other should be okay.
Exactly. And the interesting thing, actually, Dr. Tim, in this case is if these children were actually born on their justified due dates, the older child will be born the end of 2009, and their sibling is supposed to be born the beginning of 2010.
that is truly
Isn't
bizarre,
that crazy?
Isn't it, to think that they would be born in different years. Now, just as
Absolutely.
a reminder, as a refresher for our audience, tell us about twins. What's the difference between fraternal identical twins and this case?
Okay, so we all know identical twins, fraternal twins. Identical twins are called monozygotic twins. That is when a woman ovulates one egg, that egg becomes fertilized, and then when that baby is a multi-staged embryo, it divides into two genetically identical beings. So that's identical twins. Fraternal twins is when the woman ovulates 2 eggs at one time, and those 2 eggs are fertilized by 2 different sperm, and those are fraternal twins. And that could be a boy, a girl, 2 girls that don't, have the identical DNA. This case is different because the woman ovulated 1 egg that was fertilized, and then 2.5 weeks later, ovulated another egg that was fertilized at a different time. So this is much different than the traditional twinning we're familiar with.
And what is the technical phrase that you would apply to this situation? I'm just curious.
This is called superfetation. That's the term. And it's to conceive. Yes, to conceive while already pregnant. That's what that means.
And obviously, as you said, extremely rare, but we're hoping
Extremely
in this case
rare.
for a good outcome. All right,
I think it will be
Karen,
a good
thank
outcome.
you so. We hope so too. Thanks, Karen, for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Dr. Tim.
ABC News Now. Good to know.